Hey guys, and welcome. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different video. Today I'm going to be going through my wish list for all the new Regiment of Renown units which we are going to be expecting in the next coming days. And I think CA made an announcement they're going to be coming like next week, which is really exciting stuff. Add a bit new fresh blood to the battlefield. So I'm going to be going through every single faction and my two perfect units to be done as the Regiment of Renown. Some of them are ridiculous and wacky, some are much more sensible and sane. So let's delve into this, starting with Grand Cathay. Now for Grand Cathay, there's two units I would like to see receive a Regiment of Renown buff. Number one is going to be the Iron Hail Gunners. They are such a cool unit thematically, and as an idea, these kind of shotgun-wielding maniacs pushing nice and close to the enemy to blow their head off is quite fun, but unfortunately, they don't tend to fare too well in competitive play. Quite good as anti-air units, but all around the enemy close them down simply too quickly, and they never really get a good chance to fire. So I would like to see them get a Regiment of Renown buff with a version of them, much like the Silver Bullets, giving them stalk and unspottable, so they can get into the right situation at the right time to obliterate the enemy with a deadly salvo of missiles right directly to the face. Maybe also increasing their range a little bit certainly would go a long way. My second unit for Grand Cathay to receive a Regiment of Renown buff would be the Celestial Dragon Guard, who I don't need to delve too much into them. They're not great. They're not that good. They don't tend to be very cost effective despite being a fantastically fun and thematic unit. Now, something Grand Cathay really tend to struggle with is dealing with enemy infantry. Mass infantry is something they simply cannot handle, in particular with their combat troops. They've got, fire rain rockets and loads of crossbows to deal with the enemy infantry, but none in the form of their own forces. So I think giving Celestial Dragon Guard a variety, the Regiment of Renown, where they have dual swords or sword and shield instead of halberds, making them anti-infantry, and you can even combine this with the Ancestral Warriors to make them an unbreakable unit in the center of the Grand Cathay force, who are anti-infantry slaughtering monsters. I think they'd be quite expensive, but a very fun and thematic unit who can hold the line and dish out the pain, something Grand Cathay is severely lacking. So that was it for Grand Cathay, Dragon Guard, as well as Iron Hail Gunners. But up next, we're going to be looking at Khorne. And I think there's one very simple Regiment of Renown unit, which we are very likely to see, and I think it'd be pretty damn cool. And that is going to be the Chaos Warriors of Khorne dual weapons. In lore, Khorne have Berserkers, these double axe-wielding maniacs, and this is what I think the dual weapons were meant to be, but they are just Chaos Warriors of Khorne. So I think this does give a bit of a hole in their lore where we can really kind of open it up and make them this berserk unit. And it's quite easy to do that. Of course, they're going to be throwing their bodies on the line with a really reckless abandon and not really caring, too much if they die or if they live. So I definitely think they should be an unbreakable unit. I believe Norska have a very similar one with a rage mechanic. So the more damage they do, the more physical resistance they get as they go deeper and deeper into a blood fury. Now, is this something that Khorne really needs? Not particularly. They have really good infantry, but I think it'd be very fun and lore-matic to have just a wrecking ball of chainsaws kind of carving through the enemy with this unbreakable blob of Berserkers. That's number one, Chaos Warriors of Khorne. Very simple and quite easy to implement. Number two is something which I think is almost impossible to implement, but I would love it so much, and that is a Regiment of Renown Skull Crushers. Khorne Cavalry is quite underwhelming in general and just doesn't tend to be able to pay for itself. So I would love to, delve even deeper into that. We've already gone for really expensive cav. I want super expensive cavalry. A unit of Skull Crushers with just 3 models, but instead of riding their Juggernaut mounts, they are riding skull cannons into battle. That is about as rock and roll and heavy metal as you can get. And I think they're two units which do suffer a little bit. The Skull Crushers and the Skull Cannon. To combine the two and make for an absolute laugh, gives you good mobility. You can blitz enemy at range and then delve into combat to really rip and tear. To make this unit balanced, they probably wouldn't be able to replenish their ammunition, or at least so at a slower rate, or just make them disgustingly expensive. But yeah, Skull cannons being ridden by Skull Crushers, what's not to love? So that's it for Khorne. Quite simple stuff. I'd love to see some dual weapons get buffed up to Berserkers and just a crazy unit of Skull Cannon Cavalry. Up next we have Kislev, however. Unfortunately, this one's a little bit more basic and boring perhaps than some of my other suggestions yet to come. But I would love to see some Royal Warbear Riders as the personal bodyguard for Boris. I think warbears and bears in general are just very fun to play with and kind of suit Kislev to a T. and a unit of Royal Guard to match the mighty Boris himself could certainly be some good fun. Would I like to be included to them? Well, almost a reversal of Guardian. So when they are next to Boris, maybe also a basic Boyar Lord, they should themselves receive a buff. Rather than giving Guardian to their Lord, they receive Guardian, getting some physical resistance, perhaps even becoming stubborn or a similar trait, so immune to psychology, and getting buffs to their stats in general, so they fight harder the closer they are to a friendly Lord. Likewise, one of my favourite units thematically is the Ice Guard, who guard Catherine, and are pretty cool in their own right. I think they certainly have a place in multiplayer, but are very, very squishy indeed. So I think upgrading a unit of Ice Guard to also be the personal Royal Guard for Catherine could suit rather nicely. You can do a similar thing as the Warbears, buffing their stats when they are close to their Lord, or something which is a little bit more crazy would be perhaps having them mounted on top of an elemental bear in a kind of same situation as a Dread Soaring, for example, with little skinks on top, but you have the Ice Guard riding on a platform on the back of an elemental bear. If that's too crazy though, give them a little bit more armor, give them a little bit more durability, and have them fight alongside Catherine. So that's it for Kislev, just a unit of Ice Guard and unit of Warbears. Pretty simple stuff, nothing too crazy out of the box. Make them really nicely thematic with their guard abilities, coming in being the protectors of the Lords. So up next we have Nurgle, and this is where the ideas get a little bit wacky, and I think probably unrealistic for Warhammer 3, but hey, this is a wish list. I can do pretty much what I want, and I would love to see a Regiment Renown unit of Nurglings, and I would like them disguised as bushes. That's right, I think already they blend in with the scenery rather nicely, and I would quite like a stalked version of Nurglings disguised in really terribly designed ghillie suits, which obviously wouldn't work. For some reason, the enemy can't quite separate them, perhaps feeling a little bit bad for them in their horrible designs of these hand-stitched ghillie suits, perhaps stitched together by a multitude of disease and kind of flowing sick off of them to give them stalk. I think this would be really useful in domination games in particular to get them to be backline objective grabbers, because Nurgle struggle with speed, to having a unit of stalk to get a little bit of a heads up on the opponent rather than having them react too quickly could be quite fun there. And likewise with the Nurglings, I would like them to be involved once again with a Regiment of Renown unit of Chaos Furies, as they can do bombing runs, dropping explosive Nurglings down on the enemy. So working kind of like a range flying unit, but more like Pterodon Riders from the Lizardmen with that drop rock ability. You fly over the enemy with the Furies, you drop down the Nurglings, and they explode on infantry, doing mass damage to light armor. I think I would give Nurgle a really good tool to deal with mass range, something they can struggle with because of their low speed. So you fly over the enemy, drop those exploding Nurglings, and they do big burst damage. Two Nurgling themed ones, you can definitely tell what is my favourite unit thematically from Nurgle, and let's move on to the next faction. That's it for Nurgle, pretty simple stuff, some stalked Nurglings, because I think it would look very funny, and some Chaos Furies which can drop Nurglings down on the enemy, exploding in puffs of blood and pus. But up next, it is going to be the Ogre Kingdoms, and there's two units I would like to receive the Regiment of Renown for these bad boys, and number one would be Noblars. Now, I'm not sure if this would be basic Noblars or for the Noblar Trappers, but there's a unit in lore and on tabletop called the Noblar Piggyback Riders, and it is simply a Noblar sitting on the shoulders of another Noblar pretending to be a cavalry unit. And I just think, in general, it would be hilarious. Now, there's a good chance we may get that as a permanent unit in the game, as incredibly cheap cavalry. And incredibly cheap cavalry is really something overall Ogres do lack, of course. They have the really heavy-hitting, expensive cav. It's nice to see some little bit cheaper units which can float around, capture domination objectives, and harass the enemy back line. Plus, who doesn't want to see a Noblar riding on the shoulders of another Noblar, waving a saucepan around, pretending to be a warrior? Up next as well, the second unit for the Ogre Kingdoms I'd like to see a buff is the Man-Eater Ogre Pistols, getting their Regiment of Renown, and I'd really like to see them lean into the pirate theme of the Ogres, because look at them, they're literally wearing pirate hats, they have pistols, it would work super nice. Now, how would I like to see this implemented? This would be a tricky one, because I don't know how it would work on land battles, but in domination game mode, I like to see every unit they shatter or fully kill, they get a little bit of gold to add to your reinforcement gold that you get in domination. So for those who don't know what domination is by now, which is strange, you buy reinforcements the longer the game goes on, and every time the Regiment Renowned Pirate Ogre Pistols get a kill, it adds a little bit more booty to that kind of cache of gold to spend on reinforcements. I think it'd be very fun, very thematic. Unfortunately, it doesn't synergize well with land battles, but you know, you can have just better stats on them in general, and I'm sure they'd be still pretty good fun to look at. That was it for the Ogres, getting some crazy pirates in there, as well as Nobler piggyback riders. But up next is Slamesh, and I think they're a pretty tough one to make a regiment of renown for, but I've gone for the Fiends of Slanesh, as well as the Glorious Demonettes. Now, for the Fiends of Slanesh, I would really love to see all of these lovely fiends combine into one super fiend, a single entity who is incredibly squishy, but very, very rapid, but more importantly, has the ability to spit acid into the face of the enemy from a close range, at least giving Slanesh a element of range to them, because that's something they lack completely. They have some really awesome dance moves, but alas, they have no range power, so giving them a unit which is relatively fast, can use some range prowess, would be really fun, and they can even apply their buff or their debuff, which they already do when they hit into the enemy, which of course is that musk, and they can just do that on range. So yeah, a big single fiend running around up to no good and spitting acid into the faces of the enemy. The other unit I would like to see receive a Regiment of Renown would be the Demonettes of Slanesh. Now, in lore, when you see a Demonette, they don't tend to look directly like this. You kind of see what you desire the most. It's a super sexy thing you're looking at, and you don't really want to fight it too much. So, to represent that in the game, I would actually love the unit. This is almost going to be impossible to do, but the unit to morph into something that its opponent is bad against. For example, you're attacking a heavily armored group of infantry, you click the item, or the ability, which you probably have only one use per battle, and the Demonettes, when in combat with the heavy armored troops, would transform into a unit of great weapons, for example. Or if they're facing a load of cavalry and you press this ability, they transform into a unit of halberds. Still Demonettes with a little bit more spice to their stat line there. I think that'd be really good fun. They could even visually morph and change, which I think would be hilarious, particularly if they could change into something, for example, what their opponent is. So, oh, you want a unit of peasant spearmen? They morph into peasant spearmen. So, not 100% sure how best to implement that, but I really think the Demonettes having this kind of lore-friendly way of, hey, look, we're what you most desire or what you most fear, being able to be used as a morphing ability is something that I haven't seen in previous Total War games, and I think it would be rather hilarious in general. So finally, we have Zinc. And the two units I would love to see Zinc get Regiment of Renowns for is going to be the Pink Horrors and the Flamers. We'll start with a nice simple one. I'm pretty sure 90% of you guys watching this will know what I'm going to say about the Pink Horrors, but I would love a unit of Pink Horrors who, on death, transforms into a unit of Blue Horrors. This is straight from the lore. It is how Blue Horrors are created, in fact, is when a Pink Horror dies, it splits into two Blue Horrors, I believe. There may even be more types of horrors as well, but it's relatively easy to implement, I think. They've done similar stuff before. For example, when the Hellpit Abomination dies, some slaves appear out of its body sometimes. Just having the Pink Horrors with slightly better stats, you could give in, one or two more boons to them, but realistically, slightly better stats, and when they die, they transform into one or two units of Blue Horrors. The second unit I would like to see receive a Regiment of Renown for Zinc would be the Flamers. Flamers are such a fun unit and are often picked in general. They're really angry flaming jellyfish with massive burst damage. What I would like to see them do to kind of counteract the fact they have quite poor armor and are really susceptible to missiles is that the Regiment of Renown unit would be able to pop a smoke screen, having the Flamers kind of cast a load of fire around them, creating a bucket ton of smoke, giving them some missile resistance. This could either be a permanent buff, you can see smoke kind of floating around the units at all time, or a popped ability where, for example, for 30 seconds, they would receive a big buff to their missile resistance. Pretty simple stuff here for Zinc, and I think both of those could well be implemented, though I'm not expecting them necessarily to be these units getting the Regiment Renowned when the game does drop. So that's it for me. That is all of my unit that I would like to see, and some ideas on how I would like to see the Regiment Renowned implemented into them. But I would really love to hear what your guys' thoughts are and what Regiment Renowned units you would like to see. I don't know what's coming in this pack at all. I don't know if we're going to be getting this many Regiment Renowned. I don't know if every army is going to be getting a Regiment Renowned, or if only a few are. I know they did say in their roadmap they're going to be doing, I think, 3 packs of Regiment Renowned. So I guess it's unlikely every faction would get 2 this early out the gate. But you never know, and I think it would be pretty badass to get a considerable injection into the multiplayer scene of these brand new units. If you guys enjoyed this video, if you did, make sure to leave a big old juicy thumbs up. as well as subscribing to the channel if you are new around here. Both those things help out massively. And yeah, once again, feel free to leave a comment down below what you thought of the video, but more importantly, what Regiment Renowned you personally would like to see and how you would like them implemented. So yeah, until next time, guys, peace, and as always, stay awesome.